Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is William Clouston. He is the party leader of the Social Democratic Party in England. And apropos of British politics, we get into the history of the Social Democratic Party, which is a version of socialism that seems to me to kind of make sense within the context of Britain or England as a place for a people and a government of that people that is for and by the people, but has been since liquidated by internationalist and globalist influences to the detriment of the British natives. You can find William's work down there in the description, as well as links to support this channel. Without further ado, here is William Clouston. Not sure if you're aware of my style, but I just start talking and learn on the fly what we're talking about.
That's, you know what, I interview a lot of people myself, and I find over-prepared interviews are just not very good. So I think you just chat and see where it goes. Yeah.
Well, with that said, where did your political life begin?
It was influenced by my father, really. He was an intermittent member of the Labour Party in the 60s and 70s. I'm 60 this year, so I'm not an infant. And so, yeah, in the 70s, really, I was aware of his involvement. And I suppose politics came up at the dinner table a little bit. Not massively, but it was there. And then the sort of real pivotal moment was when the Labour Party split in 1981, when the SDP set up, and my father left the Labour Party and became a founder member. And I joined a year later, which is when I was 16, so I couldn't join at 15. But yeah, so it goes all the way back, and then the whole of the 80s I was an activist in the SDP, and I'm not sure if your listeners know much about the party, but it's to date, historically, it's the biggest challenge to the two-party system in British political history, and it failed. It didn't manage to dislodge one of the two big parties, but it was a hell of a go, and millions of votes, and a lot of effort.
Mm-hmm. What was what do you think catapulted it to the stronghold that it secured?
I think probably very broadly the way the country was being governed. I think a lot of discontentment, but I suppose the proximate cause was a split in the Labour Party, just right-left split. And I suppose I've often pondered this, actually. It's interesting because virtually all of the Anglosphere, I'm not sure if people have really thought about this, but virtually all of the Anglosphere has two-party politics. You know, if you look at Britain, Ireland, Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, you have red and blue usually, and it's very persistent. In fact, the number of times in the Anglosphere that a major party has been dislodged from the duopolies are very rare. That virtually, I mean, it happened here 100 years ago, but
oh, really?
Yeah, it used to be the Tories and the Liberals.
Okay,
but working class people didn't have the vote until 27. So, and also the Liberal Party was a free trade party, and the Tory party is sort of a landowning party. So
the merchants and then the aristocracy, if you trace it back.
Exactly, yeah, those two. And then the working class weren't represented. So as soon as the franchise, as soon as free voting properly occurred, then working class people had to be represented, right? So millions of people needed representation. And that's what happened. So the Liberal Party got edged out. But, you've got the Republicans, the Democrats, and I think obviously the Canadian Tories got walloped, didn't they? A little quite recently, but it virtually doesn't happen. It's quite rare. These parties are really quite persistent. But,
why do you think that is? Do you have any theories or guesses?
I think there must be something cultural going on, because other countries, a lot of other Western countries in Europe are multi-party democracies, and they have voting systems which support that. Possibly possibly cultural and possibly partly to do with voting systems. First past the post tends to be brutal to smaller parties. But I'm the SDP's always been in favour of voting reform, and it's funny actually because it's one of these issues which I'm an 80. Like if people are honest, like I think people. I'm always slightly wary of people that are 100% behind something, and like I lead a party that's always been in favour of voting reform and proportional voting, but I'm only 80-20. Like 20% of me quite likes the simplicity of first past the post and then the catharsis of sacking a government. You sort of lose that. Someone said, I can't remember the quote. Peter Hitchens always quotes this. Someone said in the 70s, if there's only an inch between red and blue, it's within that inch that we live. That so, and I don't know. So it's complicated. I don't think it's very. I think politics must have more to it than just a binary choice, I guess. And Americans must feel the same, right? I mean, you get to an election. How many times have you voted and you just don't feel there's anything on the ballot that really, really grabs you, I don't know.
There's that quote that haunts me. I don't know who penned it first, but voting and going to the ballot box and voting makes you feel like you're powerful, just like buying a lottery ticket makes you feel like you're rich.
Yes, yeah.
It's so abstracted from reality.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and I think it's interesting because, of course, in a first past the post system with very solid heartlands, most of the seats are just going to be red or blue, and actually, the real decision is in the selecting power of the parties.
Yeah.
And then it's more the voting's more like a ratification. But anyway, in Britain, it is sort of falling apart. I mean, both Labour and Tories are really in desperate trouble, and there's a lot of us feel there's a multi-party politics in there trying to get out. So you've got the Greens and the Lib Dems and Reform UK, which is Farage's parties leading the polls, and these two old duopoly parties are really struggling, and I think they're probably both as vulnerable as each other, actually.
As a politician, you interact with constituents or the people, probably lots of people. I wonder how many people a year you speak to or meet or interact with, even on a very shallow level, probably thousands upon thousands of people.
Yeah. Must be thousands, because if you speak and you get around, then you certainly do. And one thing's for sure, at election time, it's quite. You usually get ill at the end. Actually, a lot of elections at the end of it, you get flu or something, because you've shaken so many hands and you've said you've been in so many TV studios, and when the election last year, which was quite important for us because we're in a regeneration stage. We're still quite small, really, compared to what we were in the 80s. But we had 20 candidates in the 2019 general election. We had 122 last time, and we had an electoral pact with Reform UK. It was only a small pact, but it was 24 votes. And I may be the person that goes down history as the only person ever to do a pact with Farage's party. But I don't know. But I stopped. I quite like a glass of wine, but for the whole 6 weeks I stopped, didn't drink a thing until the last week. Actually, I broke after a TV debate, and I just got back to where I stay in London. I thought, all right, I'm having a pint now. I'm so fed with this. And I did, but yeah, I did 16-hour days. Like it's just people don't, and people. No one who hasn't done it would understand what it's actually like. You've got to get out. I don't know how many we got. About over 500,000 leaflets designed, printed, and out, and a party election broadcast filmed at reasonably short notice and approved. And it's invigorating. But yeah, you meet thousands of people, and then they don't vote for you.
Yeah. Well. It's hard to distill any relationship down to a yes or no, but that's what we like to do.
Yeah.
One of my concerns on the political level in my work is understanding who we are. A lot of these questions about who rules us and what policies should go into effect or be reformed always kind of indicate that politics is for and of a people. And I know that Britain's in a jam with migration and the two-party system, or the parties that are in power now, or don't seem to be representing the people. But you as a politician interacting with so many people, even on a shallow level, going from one town to the next village or whatever, you probably have an insight into who the English are. Is that a question that you could riff on? Does that even make sense to ask, who are the English?
It does, because it depends, because we're a very divided society now, and there's been very, very rapid social change. So it largely actually depends where you are in the country, in the cities, in London and Birmingham, Manchester, and so on. It is actually a question which we get asked a lot, because there's a sort of identity crisis. Who are we? To liberals, anyone that turns up and has legal status to reside in the country and declares themselves English or British has to be, and they have to assert that they're as English as anyone who has been here for 1,500 years, 1,600 years, probably, or more. It depends where you are. And it's a question which politicians really struggle with, because is that true? Are you, if it's thick and thin nationality, isn't it, or identity? Yeah. So if your definition is so thin, and everyone qualifies immediately, and maybe someone qualifies who can't even speak English, quite possibly, then the bar is so low that anyone can be English. Or, I mean, if you arrived, or anyone, from around the world could be English. But there's a sense that the English, and I know it's slightly more complicated here because it's English, Scots, and Welsh, and Cornish, I guess. And even in Scotland, there was at least 3 or 4 different sort of groups. Even, you could even
sub-ethnos.
Yeah, Norse Scots, which my father's side are from Orkney and Shetland, and that's Norse, don't wear kilts. It's pretty flat society, Nordic structure really, and history and names. And then you've got the Western Isles, which are absolutely Celtic and Gaelic speaking still in parts. So it's very complicated. I don't know. I just think it's. Yeah, so it certainly is a good question. It depends where you are. In the rural hinterland, if you're in sort of unindustrialized English counties like Norfolk or Herefordshire or parts of Northumberland, there's no question, if you're in a village, that people wouldn't have any. They wouldn't even struggle over their Englishness or whatever. They'd take it totally for granted. But there has been such revolutionary change that I think it is a more difficult question to answer now. And actually, it is very, very complicated. And again, your reaction to it. You see, again, I struggle with people that think it's so simple. I can just give you a simple answer. The people, for instance, I'll give you an example. Let's cut to the chase. The people that are indifferent to the massive social change in the cities. So you had London in the 50s and 60s, which was sort of 95% white British, or certainly in the 50s it was, and is minority white British now. Birmingham's the same, Manchester heading that way, I guess. The people that say, "Oh, it doesn't matter," I think that's a little bit brutal. I think that's a slightly.
It doesn't matter what an Englishman is.
Yeah, or that it doesn't matter that there has been such huge change, and to cut to the chase, to deny the sort of white British in that city and the people that used to live there and have moved or been displaced, to think it doesn't matter to them that change isn't loss in some way, that's very common in amongst liberal leftists or progressives or hyperliberals, however you want to call them. That view is very common. They just don't think it matters. Whereas I think to many English people, it probably does matter. Actually, there is a sense of change and change as loss, and I think that's reasonable. But then if you say, well, what can you do about it? It's extraordinarily difficult to know to have a policy because there's been so much change, massive
Yeah.
change. You know.
Well, you said change can be seen as loss even if certain groups or people in power don't really care about that loss. But is it an exchange of anything? Are the English gaining anything from this loss of their thicker Englishness?
I don't think they are, to be honest with you. I don't think they are. I think I think one of the biggest political crises. I mean, and again, just to use another example, so you say, I go around the country and I meet a lot of people. People find it very hard to hit the SDP. We haven't, had representation in Parliament for a long time, and we're building up. And a lot of people have a soft spot for us. A lot of older voters have voted for us in the past. But people will say you're all the same, all you politicians, and we get tarred with the same brush. It's very difficult to get out of that. And my often, and there's this huge anger about politicians and politics. There's a massive hostility to the lying and to the debasement of politics. So there's a huge, and often I say, well, to be honest, I sort of agree with you. And if I didn't agree with you, I wouldn't be here sort of wasting time trying to solve it. But one of the big, if you look at the source of the discontentment, and the worst, and actually politicians of all stripes will tell you this, on immigration, migration, and demographic change in Europe and in Britain, the most devastating three words that a voter will ever say to a politician is this: we were never asked. In the sense that literally there never has been democratic consent for this project. And I think it really...
Probably quite the opposite.
Oh yeah, quite the opposite. Yeah, you could vote. I mean, time after time, you could vote for parties, and that's just a quick study of. And there are websites that have them here of the manifestos post-war, and they virtually all promised to clamp down on migration. But yeah, so I honestly, I'm on the voter side. I almost don't know what you do about that. I mean, in recent times, Boris Johnson, this is why the Tories are in terrible trouble. I've got friends that are Tories, I drink with them regularly, and they're good company, but I don't see how they can get back easily, because a guy rode the wave of Brexit and remember, as an American, right? My wife's Australian, and you guys understand nation state democracy. You take it for granted that you decide the key things, whereas we for a long time didn't have that right, and all the big stuff like what your interest rate was, or your border is, or your industrial policy, or trade policy, or immigration, was all decided by other people, and
By who?
well, by the Commission and as part of the treaties. I mean,
Oh,
we're all suffering from this. I think you're in a much better position in the United States, but there's been a massive tendency to try and decide things pre-politically and legally. I mean, philosophically, a lot of people will blame. They say that all roads, lead back to John Rawls, who was probably trying to do good stuff, but liberal legalism is a thing. You try and vouchsafe rights by legal terms and not democratic terms. And when the clash comes, the public will say, we want a secure border, or we want to do this, and someone will say, no, you can't, because the treaty says you can't. It's so. Yeah, for years, when we were in the EU, we were fettered. You couldn't, and I'll say it. You can't be a social democracy if you're a member state of the EU. I know it sounds daft, but you can't be, because all the big stuff is literally beyond the reach of the voter. I love Portugal, and I take a little bit of an interest in Portuguese politics, but because the Portuguese have the euro and they're fully integrated in the system, in the acquis, their voters going to the polling stations have no way of appointing or sacking people that make the decisions on the five big things, your border, your interest rate, your money, your trade policy, or any of that stuff. It's gone now. It's
Yeah.
other bit.
Yeah.
So that's what the Tories rode this wave. The British people didn't like that and wanted to sort of have nation state democracy back. And but then it was such a betrayal. They got out technically, but then Boris Johnson instigated this huge tidal wave of migration. We had, remember, our
Under
country.
whose direction? Who is he
Well,
serving?
he
Not the
just
people.
no.
Maybe himself a little bit, but why would he want that?
There are some short term. I think a lot of it's high time preference and instant
Okay.
gratification. So I think there are
Economic.
some short term skills gaps, and then there was a chance that the UK economy might not grow. And I think they just switched on the taps because he didn't want anyone saying you've left the EU and then the British economy is going down the tubes. But we always argued from my party's point of view, and we had an MP, we had a member of the European Parliament arguing for this as well in the party, and we made the point that there would be some adaptation and you got to pay a price. It's not going to be, you don't get something with nothing.
Yeah, no, it was kind of like a quantitative easing via people rather
Yeah.
than currency.
Exactly right, but it's very costly, and of course, a lot of the low-skilled migration. I mean, actually, in Europe, I don't know if you're aware, there's been a lot of studies on the fiscal effects and costs of illegal migration in Holland and Denmark and Finland, and it's astonishingly costly. I mean, like Van der Beek study, yeah, you've probably seen it. You're talking over 500,000. I think it's 630,000 euros lifetime cost per person of a legal migrant, and we're getting, several. You can get 1,000 in a day, easily. So you're literally you're just destroying your future by
Yeah.
allowing this chaos to happen. And someone who is certainly on the economic left, myself, who would argue this point, and we get called all sorts of nasty names, but basically common sense. If you want to hold on to your state, really, you might want a border, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, social democracy means something different or could mean something different in England than it would in America.
Yeah.
Just because of the vastness of our states and the way that we're set up globally. But can you give me a picture of what social democracy would look like in England if implemented?
Yeah, I mean, I would make the first point about the democratic point. So I think most of the positions, if you're a social democrat, you have to accept, again, sounds a bit crude, but majority rule on certain things. I mean, if the public wants something, one of the definitions would of social democracy would be that the majority win the day. And so whatever you think about what you should do, I think you have to respect that. I think it's a fundamental thing. But yeah, I mean, our version of social democracy's sort of state and nation, faith, flag, and family, you might call it. So it's the flavour of the day in terms of political science. It's a little bit left on the economics, or sensibly left, but culturally conservative, socially conservative. And it's a little bit like the Labour Party before it all went wrong, before the sort of great liberalisation. So just to give you some idea, and this is different. I mean, I realised travelling when I was younger that, of course, the centre of gravity politically is different in every country, isn't it? And I remember I went down to see a friend in South Africa, and I was probably just a sort of fairly centrist, social democrat at the time still, and some of the white South Africans around the braai thought I was literally a communist, because their center of gravity and their difficulties was a little bit different to mine. But so I'm in this country, the sort of thing we would argue for is state ownership of the railways and the natural monopolies. So it makes sense to us to have the water industry under state control. It's a natural monopoly. It doesn't lend itself to competition. Mrs. Thatcher privatized it, and then you have to have a series of regulators to try to fix the price. And also various foreign interests have that asset and bleed it. I can see incentives. I mean, economists talk about incentives all the time, but the incentives are different. If you're a privatized utility like a water company, your interest is to sweat the assets and get a return for your shareholders. And if your shareholders are foreign entities, which in the UK they often are, to sweat the assets and repatriate the returns. So it's disastrous for us really to have that system.
Wow.
Power generation, the same. I think power generation and transmission and distribution, again, natural monopoly lends itself to state action. And we, as a party, we've just published a new green paper on energy, which tracks the whole of the history of of what happened under privatization. And actually, the state did a very, very good job post-war of producing, nuclear power and other, coal-fired power stations, and you had constant growth, literally 3% growth in gigawatt output, served industry, prices were reasonable, and then they privatize it, and it all goes wrong. That
Why did
combined
they privatize it? What was the rationale?
ideology, yeah, it was a wave of, again, people define it in different ways, but it was associated with, I mean, in your country, it would be associated with Chicago economics, the new right. In our country, it's Thatcherism, it's
Okay.
privatization of public assets, and the idea that it would become more efficient or whatever. It just hasn't. I mean, we've got the capital has a company, Thames Water, which has an 18 billion debt pile and is insolvent. I mean, knackered. The whole it's been utterly disastrous. And so we would argue for that. We'd also argue that the state should and could do some house building. Social housing is very important. Again, the state's pretty much left the field on that. We have a housing crisis, and that's difficult for families. I love, you'd probably be aware of John Gray, the political philosopher. I love John Gray's work, and he makes the point correctly, I think, that the people that call themselves social conservatives who are on the sort of certainly on the free trade purist libertarian right, it's just not compatible. I mean, it's just not. Those ideas are not compatible. They're not coherent. It's not a coherent position. There's a brutality to free trade purism, and particularly on the industrial side. Like my eldest lived in New York and Philly for quite a long while, and he's married to an American. And I've used this in speeches. If you get the train from Penn Station down to Philly, there's a lot of industrial devastation, huge, huge amount, and all the work that Angus Deaton does on deaths of despair, opioid epidemics, and factories closing and drug dealers moving in. I make that point all the time. I think you shipping jobs out, outsourcing jobs to cheaper producers and gutting your industry is not socially conservative. So if you care about the family and stability, the foundation of the family for a long time was the industrial wage. So I'm very Trumpian and Vancian on the trade stuff.
What an interesting mix. And it makes sense. The socialist or social-ish, is that more
yeah, I mean,
proper?
social democracy is a type of socialism. It's the weakest form. But I wouldn't say it's, I mean, I'm perfectly happy. We have socialists in the party that are quite happy. But we're social democrats, so let's get it right.
Yeah. But it's rooted in a people. My people, our people, the people that you belong to, and that's why social democracy works. And this is a very cliched take. It works in the Nordic countries because of the homogeny of the people, and I wonder where Britain's or England's homogeny lies. You said family, you said faith, but I mean, you guys secularized really dramatically after the war. So what did that leave you as with regard to an ideology that would bind your identity together?
That's a great question. That's fantastic. Yeah, I think you've really put your finger on the problem. So, by the way, I think some of the Nordic countries have the same problem. I think I think a lot of social democracy, communitarian social democracy, is based on sharing and oneness, and it's really a question of the I we balance. It's the me us balance, and it's us. There's a lot of us in it. You know, if you say until Nigel Farage nicked the sort of strap line, it's family, community, nation. He nicked it. There's nothing much I can do about that. We didn't copyright it, but the family, community, nation thing, that those are all things where people come together to share. The first place you share is the family, and so on. So no, I think you're pointing at a real problem for us, because if you don't have the solidarity, you don't get the sharing. I mean, I said to my eldest in Philly, I said, so what do the people that you work with, why don't you have a health service? And to put it crudely, I cut the chase, we could say ages on this. He said, well, the people in the burbs are not going to pay their bills. That's it. I mean, as simple as that. And so you don't, I mean, it's a hell of a job to know how you can rebuild, solidarity, to rebuild the sort of solidarity in the group, because we have become atomized. It's the biggest problem in the West. I just think it's groups, and some of the groups that Europe has introduced are so clannish, and so the in-group solidarity is so off the scale high.
Yeah.
It wouldn't occur to them to even to pay tax in the sort of sense, because why would you? So it's a challenge, and I don't know. One of my friends who was a Tory MP who left, actually he's gone to Reform now. He was launching a book, and all social conservatives, it'd be the same in the States, I guess, get accused of wanting a better yesterday, and wanted to go back to the 50s and things. And it was Danny Kruger who's launching his book, and he said people accuse us of wanting to go back to the 1950s. And he said, it's not true, it's the 1750s we want to go back to.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But anyway, so joking aside, I literally, one of the things it was our party conference on Saturday, and I finished off my speech by just saying, one of the first things, let's not continually make it worse. Stop pouring petrol on the fire. So maybe like Trump, maybe you want to get a border. That would help.
A couple weeks ago, and I don't know the date, I don't even know the content of the, it wasn't a protest, I guess it was a march. A bunch of English flags appeared in London. And that mild show of solidarity was immediately, by the elite, construed as fascist.
Oh, yeah,
so,
cool.
But at the same time, you have massive amounts of Muslims and women in hijabs protesting too, against against Israel or whatever it is. But they are never construed as a threat by the elite, even though they are. So, what is the path toward solidarity look like for the English?
I think what's likely to happen is you're just going to go down I think unfortunately we are on a track now to sectarian politics, and you've got one or two parties, one or two people getting elected on a sort of Muslim platform, and I don't think the ruling elite. I mean, one of the most shocking things I was involved in the 80s, and I was a approved candidate, and then I had 4 years in the Tory party when I was about 20 years ago. So I didn't get back involved in politics until about 8 years ago. And one of the most shocking things about getting involved again and spending time in SW1 and meeting people in think tanks and political universities is that it's shocking how poorly governed we are. The ruling elite have no answer to this. There is no serious thinking. It's literally shocking. At least at least in your country, I mean, he has his faults, and I've said before, I'm not sure I'd actually want to vote for him, but I like Vance actually, but you know, at least Trump is sort of getting a hold of it for the whole of the
Hmm.
West, you know, and whatever you think of him. And I think something like that must be necessary if there's going to be people in Britain talk about a restoration of some kind of sort of English,
Hmm.
British values, and David Starkey, the historian, talks about that, and you can use the language, but I worry that I worry that a lot of it is like a sort of form of therapy. The people are dealing with a loss and something they can't really turn back, and they form groups and sort of talk about it as the ship goes down. And then, you
Yeah.
know, people like Peter Hitchens, who I like a lot, I've interviewed a few times, will just say, he said, it's all gone. It's gone. It's finished, he'll say. But then he says it's all a waste of time.
Hmm.
But a sort of part of me thinks that you can't be a waste of time to convene people that sort of agree with you and get a platform and put people into office,
Yeah.
and to at least try and resist some of this stuff. But I noticed you. I mean, I've followed you for a long time, and it's a privilege to be on your podcast. I looked at the Eric Kaufman interview, and I've known Eric for a long time, and he's spoken at our conference, and in all of this, there's optimism and realism or pessimism. There's optimism, you know. So I do think I wouldn't be involved unless I thought we could do something about some of this
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And I really do. And actually, in terms of the future, I still think whatever happens in division in the cities or violence or disruption or loss, I still think the British hinterland is a wonderful, wonderful place, and you could build a wonderful life for several generations to come. I think it
Yeah.
must be the case in the States, and it certainly is in Australia. So people shouldn't be so gloomy, but I do think I do think Eric is right in that I think the sort of cultural wokeism, cultural Marxism, whatever you want to call it, hyper liberalism, that we've got. I think Eric's right. It's not going away overnight, and you'll see these periods where it's challenged and people say, "Oh, it's end of woke." I don't think so. I think it's so ingrained
Hmm.
in, and there are so many people, particularly in the core, in the 15% of people that are, you know, because you're evergreen. You're the people at the universities, in the media, academic, and to some extent the cultural elite and the business elite are quite out of touch with how many of their fellow citizens think. But
Hmm.
I don't buy it. They're going to suddenly say, "Oh, actually, we're completely wrong about that." Yeah, I just don't think
Hmm.
that's happening. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Well, I just wonder, thinking historically, there's this phrase that's been chewed upon for about a year now, called the post-war consensus. And if you look at what happened to Britain following World War II, you guys were a world power and then you weren't.
Mm.
And America assumed that role. And I wonder to what degree America has been exerting soft power over your elites. And that's why the elites don't care about Britain. They care about something else. I'm looking at the buildings behind you on that
Mm.
poster or
Mm.
screen.
Mm.
Like, who do those people care about? They care
Mm.
about money, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah,
That their values are there's that meme that floats around, and you can get into the accuracy of it or how you read it, but the cluster of care that is expressed by conservative people is more toward the home, and the cluster of care that is assigned by liberal people is more towards the universal.
Mm.
And the elites that care about the universal, I'm trying to figure out what they care about, because of course they're good people, of course they have a moral compass, but they're facilitating an ever increasing erosion of British identity.
yeah.
And I don't know how you reverse that, but I want to understand where they think it's going. Like, where do they think it's going? And
Yeah. I, I think it's very interesting. I think whether they know it, I don't know whether they know it. I think they're participating in it, so they sort of must know it at one level. So I think a lot of what's happening is just quite old, normal human status appropriation via values. So for the way that status is appropriated in elite circles is by demonstrating virtue, and that's we know about that.
Credential, and then a moral credentialism too.
Yeah, exactly, and that's how you, and it's also how once you've been to the university system and you've been educated, and you have the patois, you literally have the language, then you demonstrate that, and it's sort of an in-group solidarity thing. But it's all about status, and I think that's that. One of the possible corrections to this whole mess is consequences of pathological altruism or any of the other stupid things, not having a border, or having dangerous criminals wandering around, any of this stuff. It is a direct correction to it personally. So I think you have the same issue as we do. A lot of the people make the rules are not suffering the consequences of them. But actually, in fiscal terms, because we're all in this, we will have consequences because we're sort of going bust. And you guys are as well. You do have growth, but we're going bust without growth. So I think that is a correction. I think that may happen. It may change the way people think. But I didn't. You're completely right about the cultural dominance of the United States over Britain. A
certain part of the United States, not the conservative part, but the liberal part of the United States has cultural dominance.
Yes, I think that's true. Yes, I think actually it's going to be very interesting to see what happens culturally, because I've got a lot of family in Australia, and 40 years ago when I went, there's always been antagonism between Britain and Australia, and on the sports field as well, particularly in the cricket, but. I've noticed just the last sort of few times, much less, and people across the Anglosphere, Anglo-Celtic Western civilization is a thing, and a lot of people feel it under threat, and a lot of people are feeling a new sort of sense of common solidarity, which I think again is quite a good, probably quite a helpful thing. But on the other hand, that could have quite a negative side as well, because we're all going down this this identity path, and forgetting in a nation state that we look after fellow citizens first. But so it's very complicated. But I really, the BLM event culturally I found absolutely fascinating. And Ben Copley, who is an academic that I worked with a lot, who wrote a brilliant book on the liberal left system of diversity called The Tribe. Brilliant book, quite prescient. When it happened, it was like a wave, Benjamin. It's like a complete wave over the whole of the society, and it imposed ideas and situations on the English which were not applicable. I mean, don't shoot and ridiculous. But it really showed the power. Yeah, no, it's absurd. But the whole of the sort of, and all the political parties in the establishment lapped it up. But it showed how weak our sense of ourselves was. I think.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what kind of language works in your politics, and hard on crime doesn't seem like it would float, but does it? And in talking with other people from England about the same situation, it seems like there's a need for a strong man, somebody who has authority, who can be held accountable, who can make actual decisions. But instead, you guys are captured by a distributed network of status-seeking individuals, this mega bureaucracy. And I was thinking, I had a thought, just kind of mulling this over, about how Britain did conquer the world through mercantilism and colonialism. It was through these interlocking systems of bureaucrats and organizational teams that went over and figured out the finance structures, and then figured out how to leverage a tiny army, like a tiny little army leveraged a massive amount of organizational capacity. And I think it was a bureaucratic prodigiousness almost that allowed Britain to organize the world, to be the empire upon which the sun never sat. And that kind of seems to be what is now vexing the English, the Scottish, the Irish, is this leftover, the same thing that Orwell was describing, is not so much the wrong think, all the Orwellian terms and the function, the outward functions, but the system itself of nobody's ever accountable and everybody's on the same page. And we do these rites and rituals in order to snap ourselves back into this unified distributed cognition bureaucracy. And I think that one thing that made Trump so threatening to my elites, to the American elites, is because he harnessed an individual capacity. The first person he went up against was Hillary Clinton, and you could tell every single thing that Hillary said had been workshopped before. I mean, it was very little her there. It was, which is fine. That was her style of governance, but Trump was a strong individual man, and that threatens the aesthetics, the political aesthetics of the left. And I wonder what is the possibility, or if that is possibly the only possibility left for England, is to have another king, Arthur or Cromwell, or like individual strongman who has the power, the authority, and to one, wield the sword, and then to be accountable for his decisions. Both at once.
I think there's a lot in that. I think we are totally fettered by the institutions that are captured, and which literally, it's like wading through syrup. It's not just high profile stuff.
You probably know that more than most, being a politician. And
it is. It's absolutely maddening, and so some of the basics. But things happen all the time. I'll give you a crude example from today. You'll be aware of, obviously, there's an attack on free speech, and the elites are terrified of what people say. And you get a knock on the door. It's very regular. One of the leader of our party in Scotland was arrested, for saying the wrong thing. And so this is really, really happening. You don't elect politicians for crying out loud, and it's very serious. But we today an asylum seeker was convicted of sexually assaulting a girl, and he got 12 months for it. You get less. He'll be out in 4 months. You get less for that than you do for saying the wrong thing on Twitter, on X. And that's how crazy it is. And I think the maddening thing is that there's a feeling that no one is in control. I mean, there's no one in control of the border.
Yeah.
If you want to do a trade deal, you can't do this. If you want to build a nuclear power station, you can't do it. So I agree. I think there's an urgent need for just someone. I think the public feel this as well. The public feel that there is no one protecting them. And I think it's one of the. You could argue that in the 50s and 60s, the social change that occurred then, people wanted more freedom. They wanted, self-actualization and self-expression. But I think people are beyond that now. I think it's just about security. People feel their communities, their country, their livelihoods, obviously, are not secure, and they would love a sense of authority. They would love a leader. I mean, I've always admired, and actually, it's obviously very much worth looking at Singapore as a state. But you don't in Lee Kuan Yew or Goh Keng Swee, any of the founding fathers of that state, there's none of this equivocation or weakness. Just honestly, Benjamin, just weakness, just the inability to see things as they are and to say, that's not on, it's not happening.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely what we need. And if you had a leader that had a mandate and did that, they'd have, certainly about 60% of the country on their side. But it's very difficult because a lot of the people who do wield power and are in the institutions just totally disagree with this. They would prefer the ship goes down, but stay in the international treaties that stop humanity. That's the way it is. Yeah.
Those treaties, yeah. So Britain's locus of power cannot be located in Britain because it's
No,
so enmeshed in
totally.
America to the left of you and Europe to the right kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, and actually, but to assert a sort of, I mean, I'm not arguing for a sort of Benite siege economy or a sort of crude autarky, but
Mm.
and I think I talk about this a lot. I think one of the missing links is every time anyone wants to say we really ought to do this, I'll be debating someone saying we ought to do this, and it's not free, by the way. It will cost you this. You have
Mm.
to make some sort of sacrifice. And unfortunately, as soon as you say that, a lot of people are just not, not really prepared
Well,
to
yeah.
say that it comes with a cost. I mean, you still
Yeah.
have this worldview that everything is free somehow.
Well, to go back to what you're saying about that rapid social change being a net loss for the English people, that's not a sacrifice. That's highway robbery. They were robbed, and
Yeah.
you can frame it in terms like you're losing. Do you want to sacrifice to win?
Mm.
And I just wonder what kind of parameters a new Arthur, a 20th century Arthur, would have if you've seen that. In America, we throw up a lot of personalities and stuff, and you can kind of see glimmers of really strong personalities. We have the breadth in our cultural milieu for these really strong electric figures to even like accept a lot of demonization, such as Trump has. I'm wondering
Mm.
if there's any space or stomach for that in Britain. If you've seen somebody that changes the room when he walks into it, like a Steve Jobs or a Donald Trump kind of guy.
I think you certainly need it. I think that what I tend to look for in political alliances is the people that are thoughtful, have thought this thing through and try and get the
Mm-hmm.
cause right of the problems right and the remedy, diagnose it properly. But it's also strength. It's just strength. I think there's a politician called Rupert Lowe in Britain who's quite popular. He was with Farage, but he fell out with Farage. That is a problem. I mean, the human element is a problem. A lot of people in Farage's party end up falling out with him for some reason, and whether
Mm.
they can hold, so all of the country's future is on that to some extent.
Yeah. Is there like what purity spirals or like some sort of low
I,
level?
I think I've got to be pretty careful what I say. Actually,
Yeah.
I think he in history in Nigel Farage's parties, it's been Nigel very much at the top, and he hasn't really had a broader team of all the talents. So let's put it this way: if he's going to win the next election, there's a long time to go between now and then.
Mhm.
He's got to do that probably for the first time. But I think the system is much more party orientated here. I mean, I think actually the strong leader is better suited to the presidential thing because a strong leader can,
Yeah.
as Trump did in 2016, come through and save you. If
Yeah.
you think he'll
Yeah.
save you. So we've
Where
made
does, but you guys had Churchill and Thatcher, so your system does produce every once in a while an
it does.
electric centralized figure.
It does, yeah, and actually, and quite often cometh the hour, cometh the man or the woman, and
Hmm.
Thatcher. I mean, I'm very very critical of Thatcher on the economics, and so I think there were a lot of unintended consequences that came from her, but I don't doubt her patriotism and her sincerity. Her official biographer is just reissuing the three volumes into one volume for the centenary of her birth, and that's coming out now. And actually, they
Hmm.
last week I did a filmed interview with him at the guest of the European Conservative. They wanted someone to. His name's Charles Moore, very brilliant biographer, and they wanted someone to debate him in a good faith way, and I did. But
Hmm.
yeah, and she came along, and there was a sense that the country was in dire straits, and she came. A lot of people still, you know, would say that she saved the country. I don't actually think she did, but I think she wanted to, you
Hmm.
know. So
Hmm.
we'll see.
Do you
One
think
of the
that
things,
what she did led to where you are now, or to what degree did it?
Yeah, I think it was what I said earlier, Benjamin. I think the new right economics is not compatible with the sort of country that she wanted. I think it's too brutal. The trade stuff is off the scale. I mean, the trade, you know, in the Britain had a trade surplus for sort of four out of 10 years in the 40 years before Thatcherism. We haven't had one since. So you know Christopher Lash and so you've got a lot of people right on trade in this. You're 20 years ahead of us intellectually on a proper critique of free trade purism and ultra liberal trade. And when when Trump announced the tariffs, the Spectator asked me to defend because no one else, virtually no other British politician, is prepared to defend.
Get the social democrat to defend Trump.
No, it does make sense because if you believe in industry and you think that's the foundation, I mean, actually, Trump's economics on protectionism are quite left wing. It's not right wing. It's certainly not free trade liberal.
No,
so
it's a different beast.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Well, what does Britain produce then? If you wind back the clock to an industrial foundation, what would that look like for Britain, for the English?
If you wanted to try and recreate it now, if you wanted to reindustrialize?
Yeah, to centralize something that you could have a strong surplus on and then have leverage against these treaties that are...
It's an incredibly difficult position to. It's like the old Irish joke. You ask a guy, how do we get someone? He says, I wouldn't start from here. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Even power generation. I mean, we're losing bulk chemicals, cement industry. Anything that's energy intensive, we're losing because they've neglected.
Do you have cultural capital then?
Oh yeah, we do. I mean, and actually services. Britain's still massive. The exports in services is huge. Banking, insurance.
Banking,
legal
insurance.
stuff.
Okay.
And the film industry is big, and the cultural stuff is big. I wouldn't deny that. It's very important. And London's still, very, very large financial centre, but in the Midlands and the North. They've just neglected making stuff, and for the same reason for you guys in Philly and Pittsburgh and Cleveland, Ohio, and all these places, I just think, I worry because I think you're trying to correct it. Whether Trump and Vance do it, you're the apex. I mean, I think you've got a very good chance because you're a much bigger country with many more resources, and you're the apex consumer. So it's not, if Trump wants to impose a tariff and choke off imports, not a lot the exporter can do. You really do have a lot of power. The U.S. consumer might have to
sacrifice, which is a hard sell by definition.
Yeah, but it is. But you would get some import substitution, and I use the analogy. I don't. Lighthizer and your free trade skeptics have made the point time and time again that if Walmart's full of, if you stop making something in the town and Walmart's full of Chinese products, eventually you won't be able to buy the products. I mean, you're beggaring yourselves, and I think that's you only have to look at the trade's deficits to see it. So I think it'll be very hard. I mean, there's an economist, Philip Pilkington, who I was debated with this. Well, I think. Culturally, the first thing you need to do if you want to get your industry back is want it back. So I don't think our political even want it. So I think at least you guys do. Yeah.
That is what was leading me to my next question. It's about the young men. I really think that is the question. All politic right now in this moment of crisis is to provide young men with a narrative that will give them strength, security, and a path forward because they have drive. If you can decouple them from that which is tapping their drive, hedonistic pleasures, short-sighted thinking, and then a feeling of loss and doom and why even bother? If the guy the Muslim that next door is going to get off raping people, and I'm gonna get thrown in jail for speaking out against that. Why even bother? So in that, but there still is an untapped that is the resource that is most valuable. If Britain's going to stand or fall on anything, it's going to be the young men and the young women. Not to leave them out, but politically, the young men, that source of energy. So I'm wondering how you capture their imagination, their attention, their love, their devotion, and their loyalty, because that is one of the electric aspects of Trump's America is just and the God bless his soul, the assassination of Charlie Kirk is bringing that into explicit light, because he represented this young man. And the energy of youth. So I'm wondering if that is something you've thought about and
I have, yeah. I think it's. I think. So there's so much in this. Firstly, I think what's happening in the United States is happening here. We're smaller, but it's actually probably to the same extent. And I guess you've got the data in of the value divides, between male and female, the graphs going in different directions, and that's happened. But actually, the political reaction in Britain is the same, and it's very encouraging. You interviewed Connor Tomlinson, but we've got other. There's a lot of other very inspirational people. Harrison Pitt, you should get him on. He is one of the brightest young conservative voices. I'm even going to say in Europe. He's a phenomenal figure, and Charlie Downs. So that the people, we have leaders. Actually, they are leaders of their generation, and what do young men do? Well, I think unless one bit of advice I give, unless you have to go to university, don't go to university. Just get a trade and do work, and just do something that probably is more suited to your temperament, and read books, and do all the other things. The other thing that's interesting culturally is just the sort of the rediscovery almost of church and religion, which again a lot of the young leaders in Britain, the younger men that are doing this are religious. Not all, but a very high, disproportionately religious.
It's no longer something to feel cringe about or shame about.
No,
they seem rather proud about it and open about it.
Oh yeah, no, just very absolutely. They would see it as foundational and argue the point. And in terms of the effect of the murder of Charlie Kirk, it's had an absolutely profound effect over here.
Really?
I was aware of him. It's a huge thing. I was aware of him, obviously, and I actually quoted him in my speech in my conference on Saturday because it happened so soon. Deeply upsetting. And but we are lucky to have what he said. We can listen, and people will listen.
Yeah.
So there is that, but I think things are there's a lot to be optimistic about. All of these young men could have just said, "Well, I'm just not going to bother. It's too bad. It's too difficult. I can't do it." That's not the case at all. So we have is very, very encouraging actually. So and in our own party the party's full of very keen activists in their 20s. I think it's happening.
What is their character like, broadly speaking, and how would it differ from when we say activist? The first thought, and I'm sorry, the first thought that comes to my mind would be just stop oil, I guess, is the British activist group, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of different temperaments and there's a lot of different directions. So what kind of young activist does the Social Democrat Party attract?
It varies. I think I would say us lot are pretty sober, serious. There's a serious streak in the SDP. Certainly the green paper that we've just published is written by a guy who's about 30 years old. And, and to be honest, I'm joking aside, and if he was if he was leading the country for 10 years, it would be a different place. It would be, and the encouraging thing is that they do believe there is this sort of there's a belief in what people call Anglo-futurism, which is technology based. It's surprising how many of them are interested in real, actually tangible solutions. We should build this or we should do this, which I always think is very encouraging. And I always try and conferences and even debates, I try and finish on what are you going to do about it? What can we do about it? And there are, the solutions are at hand. You've got to have. It's always about the will, Benjamin. It's just about finding the people that are prepared to do it.
Yeah.
And I think almost any. Think about the wrecked state of Western Europe after the Second World War. It's just a desolate. 20 years later, different place, totally different place. So I don't think.
And then 20 years later from that, a totally different place.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Maybe it's all in cycles, Benjamin. Maybe that's what happened.
Do you think that Germany won with the EU? You think that that's the Fourth Reich?
Oh, wow, that's a question. A lot of intellectuals, funnily enough, particularly those on the very hard left, view the EU as a sort of cynical vehicle for authoritarianism and control. I'd point any of your readers, any of your viewers that are really interested. The London Review of Books about 4 years ago published, I think it was 3 long pieces by Perry Anderson, who's an old Marxist English academic. Very, very good piece on Europe. Each piece was about 15,000 words each, so it's basically half a book there. And he traces the often the sort of ex-Nazi origins of some of the founding fathers of it. I'm not sure. I think it's the fascinating thing culturally, because everything's cultural. The fascinating thing culturally is that Europe. Maybe it was just literally downstream of the horrific effects of the Second World War or the
first,
but it may be that. But in the 40s and 50s, Europe's elites gave up on the idea of nationhood and the nation state. Actually Salazar, the Portuguese dictator, who's sort of fairly mild by dictator standards, he was really just a conservative Catholic, really. He commented on this, he said and he was against the EU, and he said they're actually giving up on the nation state and trying to create some sort of 1950s utopian project, which is sort of unraveling now. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be. I'm never particularly keen on sort of a conspiracy theory to it, because I think these things happen as a result of just something much bigger. It's the idea that we should start, that the future, as soon as someone says, oh, it's the future, the future of Europe, and the silly old nation states are over. We've got to cooperate and get rid of all our democracies and our differences and
hand all the power over to unelected bureaucrats.
Yeah, exactly. Don't notice that bit. Yeah, no, that's the difficulty. It's always I don't know if you follow football, but there's a very, very successful football manager of Man United called Alex Ferguson, who won about 20 cups, and he used to take the very canny Scottish manager, and he used to go away with Man U to play in Italy. And usually, quite often the Italian sides would be cleverer in some way and do something. And he said, when you go away to Italy, you always have to look what's underneath the pasta, to see underneath it.
Yeah.
What are they really doing? And I think that's the same in politics. I think they've persuaded a lot of people, and we saw it in the Brexit vote. They persuaded a lot of progressives that the future and the solidarity and the nice sort of European way was the future. But in fact, it's just a clapped out trade cartel that's finished, So, and I think I think it is. Yeah, I think it's, it doesn't, the euro currency doesn't work. The growth rates have fallen. It's Trump. You probably didn't see it, but Trump spoke to the General Assembly this afternoon.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, and it was rather good. It was pure Trump, the General Assembly of the UN, remember, is like a whole audience full of dictators, and none of them are good Democrats, and then most of them are anti-Western. And he just gave them both barrels. He basically said, that the West needs to be defended, we need to get borders back, and so on and so forth. And he was quite right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Where does Britain sit between America and Europe? What is the balance that you think you need to strike in order to reclaim like the strength of your own state?
I think we are a vassal state to the United States culturally and economically. Until recently, we were a legal vassal state to the EU. So we're in a really not a very pretty place. Well, I hope you've picked up. I'm obviously not anti-American, but I do want Britain to be able to defend itself in some of this
Stand
stuff.
on its own feet.
Yeah, but also to show a degree of muscularity where it needs to be. This is a very, very long subject. The special relationship.
Yeah.
In pure power terms, you're quite right. The British probably peaked in 1911, something like that, in industrial production terms. But in truth, actually, the thing that really wrecked Britain was the First World War. I mean, it became it bankrupted the country. It would have always lost the empire anyway, and the English mindset particularly was never going to fight for a colony. Very, very big difference. I don't know. Again, your viewers may have read this history, but the Portuguese fought to the bitter end for their colonies. They thought their ultramar was part of Portugal, and a lot of blood was spilt. I think Salazar was fighting 3 or 4 wars of insurgency simultaneously. The French in Algeria and Vietnam, Dien Bien Phu, fought. The British didn't have that. The British thought, oh, well, the game's up. It's been nice. We've enjoyed the coffee. Thanks. Cheers, guys. Or the tea. And they just left it, which is very in the British character.
Was that noble? And was it the right move?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think given the futility, the historical futility in retrospect of the European attempt to retain colonies, you'd have to say yes. But on the other hand, Britain's giving away territories now and signing them away and not caring very much about them. So there is a balance, there's got to be some national self-interest. But I think this is, again, it gets absolutely to the core of what the problem is, because your elite, I think, understand national citizen preference and national interest much better than ours do. I think ours, the things that are in the heads of the British elite is universalism, liberalism, and looking after global welfare. I don't think that's lethal. But on the optimistic side, Benjamin, I think some sort of debt crisis or debt realization reckoning will just correct people of this. I think in the end, maybe you just have to learn the lesson, and then it'll readapt. I think probably, yeah.
What ties your life together? Faith, family.
Yeah, family very much. And faith's interesting. I'm a churchgoer, but I'm not a believer. It's quite complicated, really. I love Christianity, and in particular, I love the richness of our cathedrals and churches. I take everywhere I am in the country, I'll be visiting churches, and particularly if I'm in Orkney, which is I have a house up in Orkney, and I love it there. I feel that that's normal up there. It's 70 islands in an archipelago. It's quite remote. And I'm happiest up there. In fact, I think a lot of the work I do politically, I can do because of that. Because I can just I often say to my wife, okay, that wasn't very good, or that's not ideal. But you can always put the key in the car, turn the ignition, and just drive north to Orkney. That's like a sort of it's like a sort of curative, you know. So I love that. And family, yeah, we've got 3 boys, but they're all men, and they've all left the country, unfortunately. Um, 2 live in Australia and 1 in the Indian Ocean. So I love seeing them, and we go over whenever we can. And because my daughter-in-law's American, sometimes they'll come over to New York and we'll meet them there. So that's very important. But other than that, just dog ownership. I've got a whippet, and you won't find any whippet owner that's not delighted with their dog. And music's always very important to me. I've played in a lot of bands over the years, and I'm not in a band at the moment, but love that. And there's always jazz on. I was in London last week, and I had 2 interviews, film interviews, and a TV thing. But I spotted I had a night off, so I went to see some jazz, and it was just like 2 hours of 7-piece, 2 horns, 2 keys, drummer and guitarist, and it was just great. And I love doing that. And bottle of wine, just listen to that. It's great.
Yeah. I'm thinking about what it is to be English, and over the past, I guess, specifically the 20th century, there's been so much radical change in your country that it almost seems, I wonder, because you can look at the buildings and the churches and you could probably trace your history past centuries, but there was something happened in modernity that changed so much. I wonder if there is kind of even though you're surrounded by history, there's a distance to that, or like some sort of broken chain. And I wonder if not in a nostalgic way, but if part of the project for British identity rests in connecting the dots that were broken by liberal modernism and the 2 world wars and what happened after them. And I wonder if that's part of the necessary project.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's all there. I must say I'm very lucky. I'm really, really lucky. I think you can see that chain is the connection to your ancestors' lives, or your culture, the foundations of your culture has been broken, and actually partly broken deliberately. It's the oldest one in the book, as Milan Kundera said, where you control a people is by destroying its history. I think that's true. But in my own case, I'm very lucky. I'm not being a bore about it, but I'm actually mainly Scots. It's funny, like Mum was 100% Scots and Dad is partly Scots. Well, I was born in England and look and sound English, but I don't actually consider myself English. I mean, do you remember? There's a guy, Jonathan Miller, who was a comedian, was in comedy and theatre production and he's Jewish, and he said, well, are you Jewish? And he said, well, I'm Jewish. And I sort of get the joke. Like he said, I'm English. I'm slightly English, but I'm not entirely English. And I think a lot of us are like that. Yeah. And so, but the Scots bit is the bit that really, just on a plate, connects you right back to sort of Viking times for us. It's just always
there's a thicker identity in Scotland than in England.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. I don't know if you have this in the States at all, but the Englishness is forbidden. They're all a bit scared of it. You see, it's easy. You can celebrate Irishness, or St David's Day, or St Patrick's Day, or St Andrew's Day. You can wave flags about and celebrate it. But the English, it's really been a very harsh. And it's something. It's very complicated because it's something the English have done to themselves. You see, it's fascinating. A lot of the people, I would say that our biggest problem civilizationally, and your civilization, if I've read it right, and ours, is basically white liberal self-hatred. I mean, these people, that's the core of the problem. Until we get over that, I don't think there's much fixing it, because if the in-group is totally divided in this way, I think you just
divided against themselves. Like in the root, in the most radical root, their own history, their own identity.
I mean, the denigration. I mean, the denigration of British history. And it's fascinating. We could talk about this a lot. it's okay for any. It's the particular. The problem is that we're portrayed as uniquely bad, when on the evidence we're just either not too bad or as naughty as any other, or as naughty as any other human group that had the wind behind their sails.
Yeah.
But the settler, again, it's not something we have here, because I can, like, if I'm in Orkney, I've got Clouston's an Orcadian name. It's the only place in the world that I don't have to pronounce the name. And we're sort of saying you have the right to live here. I've been here for sort of 1600 years at least, And the Vikings did, they took it violently.
Yeah.
There are no, I mean, there were,
They ain't ashamed of it.
no, there's very few Pictish place names or survive. I mean, which historians will tell you, it just is, there's pretty brutal, abrupt conquest. But I'm fascinated but like the English are disprivileged in their own country by the cultural elite, and they have that problem, but they don't have this complex psychological issue, which I think Americans, Canadians, and New Zealanders and Australians have as a settler state. I think you have a more difficult challenge against the sort of liberal progressives that would say the whole project is disgraceful, and what are you going to do? Dismantle it? Are you gonna get all these British and German people and or Italians, send them? What are you going to do? I don't know. It's a slightly different issue, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I was in London for the ARC conference in, I think it was early February. And we stayed in Westminster, just down the street from it, and walked around. And it was weird going to London. It felt like Chicago. It didn't feel like it didn't feel like a European city. It felt like an American city, just in the way that it was, the parts of it were very industrialized and not kept up. But I went to the center of London, and there was these images of kings and lions, and over the door of Westminster Abbey, there was Martin Luther King Jr. Yeah. I'm like, that's like, even Caesar didn't go down to Egypt and carve his face into the Sphinx. I mean, that is just so ostentatiously, who owns this place? Like, who do the elite serve? And it's that breaks your legacy. That just breaks your legacy. It imports this other legacy. It breaks yours.
It does, yeah. I mean, it is complicated, because, like, if you go into Westminster Abbey, of course, you've got Cecil Rhodes, a little sort of shrine to Rhodes, and so that it's complicated. I mean, I think the
multicultural, I guess.
Yeah, and you've got it all there. But I think my problem with the way that it's portrayed is that it's unfairly. But there's just a total bias in the narrative that's played out now. I think on imperial history, compare the British imperial legacy to other empires.
Any caliphate, to the Ottoman Empire, to any empire.
Anything, and or to if you want to be more parochial, to the Portuguese or the French or the Spanish or whoever. But they're determined.
The Belgians.
Well, the Belgians,
Dare we say?
Yeah. So they're determined that no credit. I mean, particularly on the slavery issue, because like for British people, they did sort of sort it out 200 years ago. It was. And actually, Doug Murray says, "We've done that. we've sorted it out." They had their reckoning. They had their moral reckoning with it, and now you're trying to dig it up and discredit the country.
I don't think that has as much sway over normal people anymore, just from my feeling. And I'm not, I have very tentative connections with British people through the internet and meeting them every once in a while. But that kind of narrative, that social justice narrative, is kind of run I
think it may be overreached. Yeah.
So the real question is, what do you replace it with? What kind of pride is correct?
Well, you just have to. It's all there. The literature, the music, the history, the buildings, everything is there. The sport, everything is there. I mean, it's just a matter of opening it up and just rediscovering it. Actually, I think that's what it is. And actually, a lot of the younger people that I mentioned, that's exactly what they do. You know, in fact, that's what they do. And so we're lucky in that respect, I think. And actually, unless you had a sort of a proper, and I don't think it's even possible, but unless you had a project to actually extinguish the canon, the philosophical, literature and all the stuff, literally you destroyed it. I don't think it's possible to destroy it. But I think at the moment the institutions are
Yeah.
are in real trouble, and that's why I say to young people, don't just give university the flick, avoid the debt, do a decent job, and do your own intellectual inquiries. Yeah.
So what's coming up for you this season?
Well, we've just had the conference. We're promoting this energy green paper, which we've had a lot of coverage, and certainly the industry people like it because it's exactly the sort of work we do in the SDP. It's 60-page proper analysis. So we're having fun promoting that. We've got election.
What is the British for geek? Because it sounds like you guys are
Geek?
kind of
No,
geeky.
it is geek. Yeah, mate. Yeah, geek. Yeah, it's a bit geeky. Yeah. But it's proper work. I'm very proud of it. We do.
Yeah.
Done it a few times. We did it on industry as well, and farming and food. So I want us to do. And actually, I'm not just blowing my trumpet. But I don't think any other party does this. We're not the biggest party in the country, but Reform don't do this sort of stuff, and the Tories are in disarray. So they, I think I one of the things I wanted to get right in my leadership, you just be yourself as well. Like I'm not a sort of wonderful orator, or I won't sort of move a room in the same way as some politicians. But you can be yourself, and if you try and take policy seriously, that's what we do. And I think I think if you want to get bigger, you have to be better as well. So one of my jobs is to try and so we are trying to do the best work. And if we do that, then we get somewhere. But there are elections next year. The Scottish elections are quite important to us because I think we have a good chance of getting someone elected into the Scottish Parliament because they have a slightly proportional system there. And then there are other city council elections which are fighting to get more representation in Leeds, which is our stronghold, the electoral stronghold. So it's us against the Labour Party and Reform there. So those are the things, and then we'll see what we do in the summer. So we just, keep on fighting.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm trying to distill what your party, what your cadre is like. Seems like you guys are professional, realistic, and there's got to be a word for. It's not blood and soil. It's the British. It's like.
Well, we say
What is it?
Well, the sort of we used to say family, community, nation, but it's state and nation, or you could say the patriotic state. That's what it's the party of the patriotic state. That's what it is.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
William, it was such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. I'll link to your work, but where can people find you, and what are they going to find when they get there?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, so that's William Clouston. You'll find me on X, and the SDP website is sdp.org.uk, and all the stuff's there. And if you want to have a look at us, probably check us out on YouTube. Our YouTube account is probably a good place. You see the speeches and interviews on there, and
you do a lot of interviews. You said.
Yeah, like, do as much TV as I do my job, So if I can get on, I will. If the BBC don't have me on so much, they don't like me. I've been on about 4 times. They usually shuffle in their seat when I say things that are true. You can't say this.
Interesting.
But yeah, check it out. It's you can find us. But it's been a thrill. It's been lovely, and I've followed you for years, and it's lovely to get on.
Yeah, it's so good. I'm gonna end the recording.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Take care.
There we go.